Good evening, this is the Oscar Expert here with Brother Bro. We are going to do our top 10 films of the year. These are not the best movies of the year, they're my favorite movies of the year. Well, I don't know, Justin, I think my list is pretty objective. When I evaluate a movie, I think, what is objectively good? I don't care about my experience. I push that down.
You almost watch it without being an observer of yourself. You're just purely looking at the screen.
I don't have an ego when I watch movies.
I actually have no opinions of any movies when I watch it, and that's why I'm objective.
Let's start off with some honorable mentions.
I can't in good conscience not leave in some of these films. I'm upset that I have to do 10. I'm going to go bottom up. Bombshell, Ford v Ferrari, Irishman. I watched it again, liked it a little more. Uncut Gems, Hollywood, Joker, A Hidden Life, and The Two Popes. And then I cut off to 10.
Honorable mentions. Hustlers, The Last Black Man in San Francisco, Us, The Irishman, and Diane. You may not have heard of Diane, but I saw it on Hulu. It was very excellent. Let's start off with our number 10s. Why don't you go first, brother, bro?
My number 10 is The Souvenir. I just couldn't keep this movie off of my list, and I have to watch it again. The Souvenir is a movie I walked away from and appreciated it more as time went on. And now I see the movie as a really interesting self-reflexive piece of cinema. A very interesting contribution to memoir films, which we don't see very often. This is the director, it seems, looking at her past in a really honest way, where nothing is embellished, and it's about a relationship that is so confusing, and this character comes across as so naive, but I find that when I look back at myself, I come across that way. I feel like I can relate with that character, and it's not a good feeling. It's kind of like 8th grade where you relate with a protagonist and you're like, oh my god, that was me. There's just something very truthful about the movie, and I really want to see it again. A lot of people think this movie is very boring. If you think that might be you, then maybe don't check it out, but I think it's really interesting and it's worth a repeat viewing.
My number 10 is Loose. The reason that I ultimately decided that I needed this movie on my top 10 was because I thought, which movie this year is having the most interesting conversation about these very modern day topics about race, what lengths America will go to push down other identities or the roots of other races in order to have this vision of whiteness. The writing is amazing. The performances are fantastic. Octavia Spencer gave one of the best performances of the year, supporting or otherwise. And this movie has key scenes in it. The one where Luce and Octavia Spencer actually really come head to head. There's a lot of great head to head scenes that are just simmering. They have so much tension that just feels really real and rooted in society. It's a really good reflection of a lot of the anger of today. The last shot really just kind of rings out with that. That was a movie that stuck with me because of that. And so I have to include that on this top 10.
I got a number 9 here, Waves, because Waves was a nightmare of a movie that I just will never forget. And there are just some shots in the movie, particularly the one where there's a character in the back of a police car that's haunting to me. It's stays with me forever. There's a 20-minute, 15-minute sequence in there that unforgettable. The reason it doesn't rank higher for me is because the impact was sort of diminished over the course of the rest of the film, which I didn't feel worked as well. See, it kind of forced catharsis to me, where it didn't feel like that was necessary, and I wish it kind of stuck more with the development in the first half, but I'm here for whatever Trey Edward Schultz wants to give me.
My number 9 is The Souvenir. Everything you said I agree with. I think this movie really simmers, and the end is the biggest simmer of all. That last shot, the visual metaphor of it, stuck with me and, hit me. And I was left walking out of the theater, and I was I think this movie's just gonna stay in me for the rest of the year, which it did. Which is why it needs to end up on this list. The way that you watch this character, and you know that you want to, stop her from making these decisions, but you also understand how someone would be in that place. Because, we're all human beings and we make those same mistakes. Great direction. I thought all the shot choices and the camera choices were amazing.
Okay, my number 8 is Loose, which you beat me to. On top of everything you said, I thought Loose was fiercely engaging. Like, it was so thrilling of a like character, like who is lying and who's being deceptive kind of movie, not knowing who the bad guy is. That like it was like an edge of your seat movie to me. I wanted to see it like immediately again, just to be like gripped by it. So that's, I think, one thing they don't tell you about Loose is that it's not a boring indie film. Like, it's really entertaining. It was really grappling with some serious themes and didn't have easy answers. Had like a really interesting view of the model minority and how someone who's in that position like grapples with the history of their people and also with like their own, in this case, like their own past. It felt like a microcosm for America and the racial tensions that it faces. I think it's like just as relevant of a movie as any. So I'm disappointed that the movie seemed to be overlooked by a lot of people, but we're gonna keep it alive. We gotta keep it in those top 10 lists. It's definitely worth a rewatch as well.
My number 8 is Toy Story 4. Toy Story 4 is a deep movie, and I will say this again, and I've said it before. It is not The Incredibles 2. It is not Finding Dory. It's not Monsters University. It's actually like a really well thought out movie. It's about the comforts that we latch onto and about moving on from those comforts, whether those comforts be trash or Andy. It's about really difficult decisions that we make in life to move on. We have sources of comfort. We have friends that we love, but then we have desires to go elsewhere. And in conflict with where we're going is like, well, like this thing's always provided me comfort. If it can't give to you anymore, you have to move on. And it had real character development. The side characters were well developed, including Bo Peep and Gabby Gabby. Not Buzz Lightyear, though. Not really well developed in the movie. He's fun. I thought this stands up with great Pixar movies. That's what I think. If it doesn't win animated feature, I'll be dismayed.
Yeah, I'll agree with all that, even though it's not in my top 10.
Or an honorable mention.
All right, fine. Toy Story 4 gets an honorable mention. You heard it here.
And I can see it being a movie where if you're like at a crossroads in your life and you watch it, it could actually speak to you. It has the goods, fellas. It has the goods.
Mm-hmm. Number 7, The Farewell. The tearjerker movie of the summer. I thought this deserved a SAG Ensemble nomination. I'm still pissed that The Grandma wasn't nominated. It's such a natural. And that it wasn't nominated for a screenplay makes me sick to my stomach. The Farewell is just memorable for me because it made me appreciate like family. I know it sounds dumb or cliche, but I don't care. This is my personal experience, and I'm offended that you'd even, to think that you could be doubting that I have personal experiences.
Thanks.
But it was about the difficulty of, the immigrant experience where you're going to a place alone, going back to where your home once was, and then like feeling like that sense of community around you that made you happy. These special relationships in your life that you no longer are in touch with, or like these moments are now so rare for you because you're now in the United States. To go back to China in this case and have that feeling of like wholeness, like of where you came from, that connection to your culture and your family and what makes you feel like warm, whether it's like food or the way that your family like bickers with each other. Like it's just a beautiful message. My goodness, it made me care so much about like the grandma's fate, watching her pulling away from the grandma. Like, my God, lots of tears in that scene.
And my number 7 is Little Women. Little Women was a movie that, it sounds silly, but it filled up my heart like a balloon when I was watching it. I think it's just a really warm movie, and Greta Gerwig did an amazing job bringing the emotion to it that it needed to like lift the material to new heights. I don't know what heights it was at. This is actually my first experience with Little Women, and I really feel like I have an understanding of why it's important and what it means to other people. I really loved both Joe's character, Amy, Timothy Chalamet's character. I really like connected with all those characters throughout the movie. It was just full of like all these goodies of life where, your friends and your family and your close relationships, wanting to be independent, like not knowing where you're going in life. It had all these like conflicts that I could relate to. It took me on a really nice ride, and it had like a nice happy ending, that warm Christmas It's a Wonderful Life kind of giddiness to it. It knows those feelings a little deeper. That's what makes it special.
Ad Astra, number 6. Ad Astra is still a really good movie. I know people stopped talking about it during award season, but it is still a movie that makes sense and means stuff. I connect with like the movie's greater like existential ambitions. It's about a man who is looking towards the future and towards like progress for his meaning, and then they put it in this whole like space journey of humankind and how, you know, that is always like striving for the next thing. And just like the message is obvious because there's voiceover, but it's still something I try to think about when I want to be zen, when I am trying to like remind myself of like things that make you happy and things that ground you. Like Ad Astra is a movie that comes to mind, and it's also just beautifully shot. Brad Pitt gives a great performance. I don't know, like the father-son thing like felt good too. It was like a pretty gorgeous, moving experience with like amazing sound. And it just felt like it puts you in a cocoon of like space, introspective space stuff. I like that.
My number 6 is also Ad Astra, so I'm basically just gonna like pick up where you left off. I agree with everything you said. I also just want to mention like how visually incredible this is as a piece of storytelling. You know, you could have told this story in a million ways, but here you have a journey of different sections in the solar system leading out to Neptune. And what Hoyte van Hoytema and the visual effects team and James Gray created atmospherically, it was like absolutely breathtaking. Some of the images like are absolutely unforgettable where they're on Neptune. If you were that fucking far out in the solar system and you were floating, how might that actually feel? This movie captured that, and it was like on an existential level that it captured that. Brad Pitt, this was an amazing performance that we should not overlook. Ad Astra shall not be overlooked. Yeah, you can say like daddy issues all you want, but like this was a pretty breathtaking movie.
I got a number 5 for you. We got Us. I'm just happy that I have a horror film on my top 10 this year, and then last year I got to put Hereditary on. We all have fun at horror films. We all want horror films to be good, and we root for them to be good. And so we've been getting some good ones. It's been great. But Us is not just good because it's a creepy movie, which it really is. Like, it's a really creepy movie. If you're in like an American literature class, they could pop this movie into the VHS, and like it would like really get your brain stirring about what the movie is saying about the country. There's so much rich symbolism and puzzle pieces that fit in all the right ways for me. And this is after my second viewing of seeing this movie. The movie will be lost on you if you try to figure out like how things are actually like physically happening in the world that the movie creates. But if you can like go along with it, it really works as like the themes and how they like string together. The movie is like exploring the underbelly of America, what is like on the surface of America and what is below the surface of America, and how like people wrestle with that on the inside, and how like we owe something to those people, and if we do owe something to like this underclass, what happens when we have this like large debt to pay off. And like what that debt is could be a lot of things. I mean, you can put like slavery in there, you can put like the prison industrial complex in there, you can put race in there, you can put class in there. I think class works better for this movie. But it's definitely a movie that you can like really like dive into and swim around. And also there's just so many scenes that like are fun and that scary that I love. And the best one I think in the movie is like the scene with Tim Heidecker and Elizabeth Moss. Like that is just such a my skin crawls scene. I think it's something only Jordan Peele would bring. I hope we remember it as one of his best films. I think we will. I'm just pumped forever for every single movie he'll ever make.
My number 5, you probably haven't seen it. It is Paddleton. He has not fucking seen it. Some people think it's like too quirky for its own good. I vehemently disagree. I think that Paddleton, unlike almost any other movie I've ever seen, captures like the depth of a relationship that is so close. This reflects the closest relationships that I have in my life. It's past knowing each other. They'll just be thinking shit and they'll just like say it to each other because he's thinking about a movie. They are like an old married couple. They're like siblings. They're best friends. They're any of these things. You can fill in the blank if you want. This movie captures like those relationships and the level of comfort in them. Yeah, it's goofy, but like that's because you get goofy with the people that you love. It's a cancer movie, and so obviously like the end is like sad as fuck, but because this relationship was so like deeply embedded, it like absolutely destroyed me to watch this movie. So also like if you don't like getting destroyed by movies, don't watch it. Ray Romano, my goodness, I would nominate him for Best Actor. Mark Duplass, you couldn't say that they're not equals. This movie was made really interestingly because they improvised like everything. They had a map of like how the movie would play out and what scenes might be about. but they improvised like all this drama. And that is part of what makes the movie so special and makes it what it is and like makes the characters work in this way. You haven't seen a movie done in this way with this improvised drama. I can't say enough good things about this movie. I think you should check it out.
Number 4, no surprise here, that Parasite is high up on my list. I obviously have been rooting for this movie to win like all the awards and stuff for award season because it strikes me as like the most crowd-pleasing movie that I could recommend to anybody, and they would be surprised at how much they enjoy this film. I mean, what hasn't been said about Paradise? Whoa.
Oh.
Mostly I love it because it's like entertaining as fuck. I'm just like the entire time I'm like hooting and howling, and then all of a sudden I'm like shrieking in my seat. But there's a little cherry on top. It is definitely a movie about class struggle in capitalism, how we explore the desires of the people who are like living beneath that, who are always like looking up to that like wealthy lifestyle. For many people, it's like just a dream that will never come true that you can achieve that. And the second time I watched this, like I felt really kind of emotional. I think I shed a tear in the end, where you really connect with like the heart of the movie and what their motivations are. Like first you're laughing, then you're being scared, and then all of a sudden like, oh my god, this movie is actually like about something I can understand and relate to, that's like really sad about the world we live in. You know, it makes you feel that pain of how difficult it is to like move up. Yeah, I mean, Parasite's just a fucking ride. It's a ride.
And my number 4 is also Parasite.
Ooh, 2 movies that we line up on.
Obviously, what can be said that hasn't been said already and that hasn't just been said? I mean, this is just an all-around, like, movie that's firing on all cylinders. Bong Joon-ho's handling of tone, you haven't seen anything like it, folks. The way that the house is, just, like, iconic. Like, this is obviously an iconic movie, and it feels like it deserves a place in the canon of cinema. I love all the performances, the blend of like comedy and thriller elements, fantastic visual metaphors. Yeah, and all around, like, this is one of the most entertaining movies of the year, and it feels like a story that after you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You can't like erase it from your mind. Like, it just becomes part of the stories that you've seen. Like, what an excellent story, what an excellent tale Parasite is.
Number 3, a movie some of you will be surprised is on here. The Last Black Man in San Francisco, to me, is like a heartbreaking and devastating, and I watched it twice. Even the second time I watched it, it had that same impact on me. And in this case, it's about a culture that is dying in San Francisco. The stories that these people tell themselves as they try to cling on to this culture which is fading away. And it shows how stories and myths can be so like deeply important to us. They are what like creates the boxes around us, like in terms of identity, and where we let ourselves move and what we let ourselves do and what we think we can achieve and aspire to. Ultimately, the movie is about somebody who has no stories and no identity to cling on to because it was usurped basically by like the rich community moving into San Francisco and changing the culture around it. I mean, aka gentrification. But I think the movie does make a point like not to use that word because it's like very loaded. It's about like the blood, sweat, and tears that went into America that all of a sudden is being like disrespected. And like the pain that somebody sees around them like as their culture is just being sort of like stepped on. It made me connect with that in a way that like I never really thought about. With gentrification in this movie is saying like there is not a place for everybody. And it's just like a sad reality that like we're losing something, you know, when we make these changes, when these cultural shifts happen. Other than that, I love this movie because it's freaking gorgeous. The first 5 minutes of the movie are like insanely gorgeous. Like I am drinking them a smoothie through a straw. Why a straw? That's how I imagined that I would be drinking a smoothie.
My number 3 is Waves. From a filmmaking standpoint, like Trey Edward Schultz is on another level. If you don't think that Trey Edward Schultz is on a Damien Chazelle level,
oh yeah,
you're not paying attention. The filmmaking is nuts. The way that he knows how his movie is going to like wrap you up is incredible. The cinematography in this movie is stunning. The editing is stunning. The sound mixing is stunning. You know, certain tracks by like Tame Impala, Kanye West, and Colin Stetson are used in places in this film, and Animal Collective that I like won't forget. There's a section in the middle of the movie that is like some of the best cinema I've ever seen. It wraps you up, and basically like the more I think about this movie and the way that it's divided into two halves and how these two halves work, I think it's actually like a relatively simple and universal truth that this movie's getting at. Is just about how fragile life is. It can collapse with the snap of your fingers, but there is also another side to life that's like full of beauty and discovery. In some ways, it doesn't look like the movie connects much, but like when you look at them side by side, you see like, why should we let what happened here taint everything else in our lives? And this is like what humanity goes through. Every day, people are like deeply hurt by tragedies, and every day, people are living their best lives. How do we reconcile these two? This movie's a reminder that even though both these things exist, this movie gets that like hell on earth exists. We should not let that stop us from like pursuing what is like beautiful, because it's still out there. It's profound, but it's simple. That's what I'm saying here. The performances are amazing. Kelvin Harrison Jr., you know, he was in Loose, but like in this, he blows my mind, just like everything else in the movie. I love Trey Edward Schultz. Anything he does next, I'm going to be front in line. Even if it is a 0 on Metacritic, I will see it.
I would actually be fascinated to see a movie that has a 0 on Metacritic from him. Number 2 and number 1 are kind of like the same. I don't really know what to do with them, because one I saw twice and one I've only seen once. So I'm going to go with Marriage Story number 2. It got even better the second time I watched it. It's the drama that I want, because every like piece of dialogue's so real. Like, and I keep remembering like random things from the movie that are just like, oh shit, yeah, like shit, yeah. Or in a scene that could have gone this way, it actually went this way, and it felt like really real for going in that direction. Or having like little moments in there, you know, life's just confusing. The scene where she orders his, like she knows what he wants to eat, and so she orders for him, and he's just like, yeah, that's what I want to eat. Like I agree. Like, get me exactly what she just said. This shows that they have like this love and compassion for each other that's like never going away, despite this whole like hell of a process. It's like a drama that I could watch like again and again. Every scene is just like delicious because of the acting and because of the writing. Every line feels like it's meticulously placed and full of nuance. This movie never feels like cliche or forced. The arguments and the back and forth, like I feel like I understand the characters' perspectives, and it's a movie that I even like draw from if I'm thinking about like real life scenarios. It's like, oh yeah, the characters in that movie, like they had a problem from this, and that sort of seems like, you know, this situation, which is real to me. Like the movie is just like a living, breathing thing to me. The way that it like ties up these really difficult chapters in these people's lives with you know, the scene when he reads the letter and then the scene where he's like singing, it gives you like such a catharsis. The second time I watched it, I was emotionally devastated, and I had been destroyed, as you say. Like I was destroyed. Absolute masterpiece. Wish it was winning Best Picture.
Number 2, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. This is a movie that I really like am eager to watch again when it comes out in February. Ultimately, like leaving this movie, I was just like so impressed by how much there was to like dissect how well this movie works on a thematic level and an emotional level, like simultaneously. This movie works in a way where like 30 minutes in, you become very aware of like all the filmmaking decisions, because the movie makes you aware of images. This one portrait is like really important. What does an image capture? And then it's like, what is the camera capturing? So there you go. There's the cinematography coming into play. And then it's like, how are these two characters like projecting images of themselves for the other one to see? And like, what does it mean for a human being to see another or to like be seen? These things sound very abstract, but like when you watch the movie and you're in it, it's like really makes sense and it's really juicy. I think it's like easily one of the most like obviously masterful films to me. Like the directing is insanely good. The whole year I was wishing that Celine Sciamma would be in the Best Director conversation. I was like blown away by what she did with it. And the two lead performances were both stunning. The movie has a fantastic final shot. What more do you need?
My number 1 is Portrait of a Lady on Fire, because it made the biggest impact on me the first time that I saw it. I do definitely want to see it again because it's like loaded with things. And one of them, like as you described very well, is like the way that like the screen is playing off of you It's just like an interesting world to be in as like a cinema lover, reflecting on like the art form itself while also just like being really invested in a story, which is about like perception and basically like the magnitude of simply looking at another person, the absolute gigantism, terrible word, of that. Like the magnitude of that act. It's about like the importance of that. It's about what it ignites. Fire. What it ignites inside of us. Like what it means to look at the person that you are infatuated by. In a very similar way to like Call Me By Your Name, weirdly enough. Or not weirdly enough. It's about a fire that will never go out when a person is like lit like that. When the, match strikes somebody and they fall in love or they become passionate, what happens to them from there on? Like their entire life has changed. Like the impact of that from that like little spark, which is just lit from like looking at somebody, is just something that lasts forever. The final shot for me is that match striking and being lit, because that final shot will stay with me forever. I mean, the final shot is just like, holy shit. And then the movie ends and you're like, holy shit. That was like way better than I could have even thought. I think the movie is like an absolute fucking masterpiece. It's like so obviously like a movie that I just find on in like the top 20 of like a list about movies and like being the best ever. It'd be like number 25 and I watch it and I'd be like, that's why it's there. If it doesn't go down as like one of the greatest movies ever, I'll be very disappointed. It just is one of the best movies. On like a level of like, yes, I like it and it was like subjectively good. But as much as you can be like objective about something and like what a movie like contributes towards like even just cinema, how much you can dive into it, and from a craft level, like how beautiful it looks and the acting, use of like sound or the lack thereof, it deserves like a place in that like top movies ever.
My number one is Marriage Story. I wasn't even like prepped to like a Baumbach movie this much. There are so many great sections, like the opening montage, Scarlett Johansson's monologue, the fight scene, Adam Driver's singing. Like there are so many scenes that I think are just like amazing that I'll think back to, and 3 or 4 of them are enough to like, if I think about them, I'll start like feeling the movie all over again. Most movies are lucky to have 2 or 3 of these, and Marriage Story is like chock full of amazing scenes. Adam Driver gives like one of the best performances. And Scarlett Johansson is incredible. Like, the supporting cast is amazing. The writing is, like, insane. Like, how Noah Baumbach? And, like, the directing is amazing. And it got overlooked as a directing movie because it's not big, which sucks. Because, like, this was easily one of the best directed movies of the year. Like, intricately everything that made it how good it was. On an emotional level, like, few movies touch this. It's not only like a great movie about the relationship of this couple and how you discover like the love that they have lingering for each other over this marriage. I felt like this movie actually reached further than that. This movie has an outlook on life. Baumbach injects the movie with this love for the ordinary, the energy that he gives to little details in life that we would overlook as being like nothing. Like, I think that he infuses the movie with like a love for those things. I think he loves the chaos. He thinks that that's like what makes life life and what makes it beautiful. Reaching for a parking ticket, a glimpse that they give each other across the table while their lawyers are there. Little like sparks of life. It not only explores marriage through a divorce, but it explores life through the deconstruction of life, like through this legal like hell that they go through. The scene where Adam Driver sings Being Alive, and then you can't help but to think of the fight scene when he's singing that song, and you think this is actually the most alive he was in the whole movie because somebody was able to like evoke that in him. So I think that this movie is not only like an excellent emotional journey of divorce, but it's also a greater statement of life and a love for the chaos of it, you know, as long as it reminds us that we're human beings. You know, this is becoming like one of the movies I think about the most. I think this might be one of my favorite movies now. There you go. A lot of people don't seem to understand why some think that. I hope that you can understand my feelings and our feelings towards all these movies. You know, hopefully it gave you a greater appreciation or you understand where we're coming from on them. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
What are your top 10 favorite activities?